In a world where political discourse is growing more heated by the day, public appearances by high-profile figures are subject to rigorous scrutiny. But when it comes to Donald Trump, scrutiny often turns into spectacle. From his infamous Twitter rants to his eyebrow-raising speeches, the former president has never been one to shy away from the spotlight. Yet, his most recent foray into the public arena, a guest appearance on the Flagrant podcast, hosted by stand-up comedians Andrew Schultz and Akash Singh, was nothing short of a disaster. Trump, who prides himself on being able to command attention, appeared wildly incoherent, rambling about everything from generals and windmills to Vice President Mike Pence, all while struggling to string together a coherent thought. His performance left the hosts visibly baffled, with laughter erupting throughout the episode, turning what could have been a moment to regain relevance into an embarrassing display of confusion. What was intended as an opportunity to discuss his political comeback became a chaotic narrative of self-contradiction, unverified claims, and outright absurdities. The hosts tried to engage Trump on serious political issues, but the conversation quickly unraveled, descending into a cringeworthy spectacle where Trump rambled incoherently about unrelated topics, leaving the hosts and their audience in stitches. Donald Trump, known for his larger-than-life personality, entered the podcast world, hoping to reignite the fervor of his political base. The Flagrant podcast, known for its comedic tone and irreverence, seemed an odd venue for Trump to assert his seriousness as a political leader. But in true Trump fashion, he likely believed that his magnetic personality could charm even the toughest crowd. Unfortunately for the former president, the opposite happened. Right from the start, Trump's performance was a train wreck. During the interview, he boasted about his intelligence and claimed that his ability to weave through conversations was proof of his brilliance. The so-called weave quickly became an unintentional punchline as Trump shifted between topics, often without making any sense. His first blunder came when he began discussing Dwight Eisenhower, referring to him as a moderate general, before going off on a tangent about how 8% of U.S. presidents were generals, while the other 92% were politicians. Trump's attempt to sound knowledgeable backfired, as the statistic came out of nowhere and lacked context. The hosts, Schultz and Singh, initially tried to follow his logic, but quickly realized that there was no cohesive argument to follow. It wasn't long before they stopped trying to mask their laughter, prompting Trump to continue in a spiral of nonsensical claims. The weave of incoherence. As the podcast progressed, Trump became increasingly erratic. What started as a discussion about generals, Eisenhower, and Trump's odd statistical breakdown quickly devolved into a bizarre rant about how world leaders were laughing at him. Trump claimed that despite the global mockery, he was respected by the likes of TV, suggesting that his popularity on screen somehow validated his standing as a world leader. "TV laughs with me, not at me," he proclaimed, an assertion that left the hosts visibly confused before they couldn't hold back their laughter any longer. The disjointed nature of Trump's answers became the focal point of the episode. He continued weaving in and out of unrelated topics, linking Eisenhower to random statistics, and then back to himself. His erratic speaking style was on full display, and his self-assuredness, which often borders on delusion, only added to the comedy of the moment. At one point, he even quoted Mahatma Gandhi's famous line, "First they ignore you, then they laugh at you," but butchered it so badly that even he couldn't finish the quote without pausing awkwardly. As Trump continued, his incoherence reached new heights when he switched abruptly to a tirade about windmills. Without any transition, he ranted about how windmills cause cancer and destroy the environment, which left the hosts and viewers wondering how they had gone from Eisenhower and generals to cancer-causing windmills. The absurdity of the moment was so overwhelming that the hosts began openly mocking Trump's train of thought. The Pence Problem. In the midst of the chaos, One of the hosts tried to steer the conversation back to a relevant topic: Mike Pence. The former vice president had distanced himself from Trump following the January 6th insurrection, making him a critical point of contention in Trump's political career. When asked what happened between him and Pence, Trump's response was as bewildering as the rest of the interview. "Pence, you got anything for Mike Pence?" "Well, it's a shame because we had a very good relationship," Trump started, offering what seemed like a normal political statement. But soon enough, he pivoted to an outlandish claim. He couldn't cross the line of doing what was right. Trump went on to suggest that Pence had the authority to overturn the 2020 election results, but refused to do so, all because he was following bad legal advice. He had a lawyer who said he didn't have that right, but he did have that right, Trump claimed. This statement was immediately met with disbelief. Trump seemed oblivious to the fact that the very premise of his argument had been debunked multiple times by legal experts and courts alike. Pence himself had been clear on the matter, stating that he did not have the constitutional authority to overturn the election results, and that Trump's pressure to do so was both unethical and unconstitutional. Trump, however, doubled down, claiming that the law was changed after the fact to prevent future vice presidents from doing exactly what he had asked of Pence. "I turned out to be right," he boasted, without acknowledging that his entire argument had been refuted long before. The hosts, trying to process the absurdity of Trump's reasoning, couldn't help but laugh. As Trump continued to make bizarre claims, they seemed to realize that trying to engage in serious political discussion was futile. Trump had clearly come to the podcast to promote his alternate reality, where facts and logic took a back seat to his delusions of grandeur. The unraveling, laughter, and absurdity. As the interview wore on, Trump's incoherent responses became more frequent, and the host's laughter grew louder. The moment that sealed Trump's fate as the butt of the joke came when he was asked to speculate about who was behind an alleged assassination attempt on his life. Rather than giving a serious answer, Trump launched into a nonsensical ramble, trying to weave together unrelated events before finally getting lost in his own explanation. One of the hosts could no longer contain his amusement and burst into laughter mid-interview. Trump, visibly confused by the reaction, paused to explain his convoluted thought process, but only made matters worse. His disjointed speech had become so absurd that the hosts were openly mocking him to his face, turning the interview into a comedy routine at Trump's expense. The moment was particularly striking because it highlighted Trump's growing disconnect from reality. Once hailed as a political disruptor, capable of dominating the media cycle, Trump now found himself unable to articulate a coherent argument. Instead, he flailed wildly, jumping from one disjointed topic to another, leaving even his most fervent supporters baffled by his performance. The Pence indictment tangle. Perhaps the most telling part of the interview came when Trump tried to defend his actions leading up to the January 6th insurrection. He repeated the false claim that Pence had the legal authority to reject the election results, which had been a central theme in his post-election narrative. However, his version of events was quickly dismantled by Pence himself in subsequent interviews. In a stark contrast to Trump's rambling, Pence appeared calm and resolute in interviews after the podcast debacle. He reiterated that he had made it clear to Trump before January 6th that he did not have the power to overturn the election, and that Trump's advisors had pushed him to act unconstitutionally. Pence also emphasized that Trump's continued refusal to accept the election results posed a direct threat to democracy. "I rejected that out of hand," Pence said in an interview with Fox News. "I had no right to overturn the election. President Trump asked me to put him over the Constitution, but I chose the Constitution, and I always will." Pence's clear and concise rejection of Trump's demands underscored just how out of touch Trump had become. While Trump was busy spinning conspiracy theories and rambling incoherently on a podcast, Pence was presenting himself as a principled leader who had stood up to the pressures of a corrupt administration. In the aftermath of Donald Trump's disastrous appearance on the Flagrant podcast, one thing became abundantly clear. The former president is struggling to maintain his grasp on reality. His incoherent ramblings, wild tangents, and blatant falsehoods were met with laughter from the hosts and bewilderment from viewers. What was intended to be an opportunity for Trump to reassert himself as a serious political figure turned into a farcical display of confusion and delusion. Trump's inability to engage in meaningful political discourse was on full display as he fumbled through the interview, making wild claims and failing to articulate a coherent argument. The laughter from the hosts, though unintentional at first, became a fitting response to Trump's unraveling. In a world where facts matter and leaders are expected to demonstrate clear thinking, Trump's performance was a stark reminder of why many Americans, including former allies like Mike Pence, have distanced themselves from him. As the 2024 election approaches, Trump's disastrous podcast appearance serves as a cautionary tale for those who continue to support him. His inability to engage in serious political conversation, coupled with his penchant for spreading disinformation, makes him a liability in an increasingly divided political landscape. For those who were once captivated by his brash, no-holds-barred approach to politics, Trump's incoherent performance on the Flagrant podcast may have been the final straw. The former president may still command attention, but whether he can command respect is another question entirely.